Great. Okay.
Mark, I'm really amazed by his English prose.
In what sense?
The quality of his English prose, his power of expression.
Mhm.
It's quite amazing.
It really is. Yeah. Okay, let's start. I want to introduce you to two systems of organization that are available to us through Aurobindo. Another fact which is ordinarily hidden from view is that human beings are inseparably one with the universal being. There are, he says, two systems simultaneously active in the organization of the being and its parts. That's from Letters on Yoga. One system is concentric, like a series of rings or sheaths. The other is vertical, like a flight of steps. So let's take a look at the concentric one. So the concentric system consists of the outer or surface being, which is the darkest gray here, the inner being, which is a lighter shade of gray, and supporting both of these, the inmost being, or what he calls the psychic. And he means there the soul. The outer being and the inner being behind it constitute our phenomenal or instrumental being and are said to belong to nature or prakriti. They both have three corresponding parts, as you see, physical, vital, and mental in both cases. Okay, Bill Kelly, let's switch back to reading number 8.
There are, we might say, two beings in us. One on the surface, our ordinary exterior mind, life, body consciousness. Another behind the veil, an inner mind, an inner life, an inner physical consciousness, constituting another or inner self.
So the inmost being is the Purusha that we talked about, the true being, the P with a capital P person. In the Purusha, there is an inmost mental, an inmost vital, and an inmost psychic, physical. In addition, at the very core of this inmost being is the psychic being or soul. And the psychic being is usually referred to by Aurobindo as the inmost being. So let's come back to that picture. So this white circle in the center is a very fascinating series of concepts that we'll explore probably next week. Now, the vertical system is like a staircase consisting of various levels, planes, or gradations of consciousness below and above mental consciousness, which is the level which we're most familiar with as human beings. They range from the lowest, which we've already talked about, the inconscient, where there is no visible manifestation of consciousness at all, to the very highest, which he calls Sat Chit Ananda. So that's what this is there to represent. So we've spoken last week about the inconscient and a little bit about the subconscient. And then we ascend here from the physical, vital, and mind. Each of us has those in our outer being and also in our inner being and in our inmost being. And then above that are all these levels of mind that people don't know anything about, which I'm suspecting we're going to find some parallels with Abdu'l-Baha and his stages of the soul. That's my guess. I haven't actually done the comparison yet. That's still homework for me, but that last class is where we're going to try and Compare the two side by side. Okay. So let's now begin our examination of the main parts and planes of the human being as described by Aurobindo. In his thought, the concept of the levels of consciousness is intimately related to the concept of the evolution of consciousness, which we reviewed last week. Okay, so let's see if Lisa would read again. I know it's twice in one night, but what the heck.
Sure, no problem. This one being and consciousness is involved here in matter. Evolution is the method by which it liberates itself. Consciousness appears in what seems to be inconscient, and once having appeared, is self-impelled to grow higher and higher, and at the same time to enlarge and develop towards a greater and greater perfection. Life is the first step of this release of consciousness. Mind is the second. But the evolution does not finish with mind. It awaits a release into something greater, a consciousness which is spiritual and supramental.
Okay. His understanding is that evolution is, in fact, spiritual in nature. And I was reading something very similar to that in Moment today. So I'm thinking we're on the same page. Carolyn, are you here?
No, Carolyn's not with us tonight.
Okay. How about Ingrid?
Oh,
Heather?
Heather's here.
Oh, good.
Sorry, you're on mute, Heather.
Okay, number 10.
Yes, please.
Okay. In my explanation of the universe, I have put forward this cardinal fact of a spiritual evolution as the meaning of our existence here. It is a series of ascents from the physical being and consciousness to the vital, the being dominated by the life self. Thence to the mental being realized in the fully developed man, and thence into the perfect consciousness, which is beyond the mental, into the supramental consciousness and the supramental being.
Well, that's the progression that he sees as a possibility for us. Okay. But at the moment, we're just looking at the outer being. So under normal circumstances, humans think of themselves as mental beings living in a physical body sustained by life energy. Together, these three elements, the mind, life, and body, comprise what Aurobindo calls the outer being or the surface personality. He understood that each of these elements has its own distinct type of consciousness, even though they are mixed together in our ordinary awareness. I know Lori is here, so if you could read number 11, that would be great.
Each plane of our being, mental, vital, physical, has its own consciousness, separate, though interconnected and interacting. But to our outer mind and sense, in our waking experience, they are all confused together. The body, for instance, has its own consciousness and acts from it, even without any mental will of our own, or even against that will. And our surface mind knows very little about this body consciousness, feels it only in an imperfect way, sees only its results, and has the greatest difficulty in finding out their causes. Sri Aurobindo, Letters on Yoga.
So let's review each of these three elements of the outer being one at a time. First, let's talk about the physical body. So the human physical body is a highly complex instrument composed of flesh, blood, bones, muscles, brain, heart, nervous system, lungs, digestive organs, and tissues, to name a handful of its components. In Aurobindo's vocabulary, this object of medical concern is the outer physical or the surface physical. It interacts with its environment by means of its 5 sensory organs, the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and skin. The vast array of parts comprising the human physical body are all derived from nature's material plane. Consequently, this level of mankind functions in accordance with the same laws as does all matter. And that I'm asking Alan to read, number 12.
Matter below life and mind contain in itself the balance between a perfect poise of tranquility and the action of an immeasurable energy, but it does not possess that which it contains. Its peace wears the dull mask of an obscure inertia, a sleep of unconsciousness, or rather of a drugged and imprisoned consciousness, driven by a force which is its real self, but whose sense it cannot yet seize nor share. It has not the awakened joy of its own harmonious energies. The life divine.
So just when you thought you knew what he was talking about, he's able to spin a riff on it that is uniquely his own. The dull mask of obscure inertia, the sleep of unconsciousness that does the same thing over and over and over and over again. That's matter. The physical plane is dominated by inertia and inconscience. Aurobindo borrows the Sanskrit term tamas from Sankhya philosophy for this property. Now, in order to explain that, I need to take a little side trip here to talk about the 3 gunas. Guna is spelled G-U-N-A. In the Sankhya system, everything in nature is composed of 3 qualities or modes, which is the word guna. These qualities are known as tamas, rajas, and sattva. Okay, so 13 is Melinda's turn.
There you go.
Sattva is the force of equilibrium and translate in quality as good and harmony and happiness and light. Rajas is the force of kinesis and translate in quality as struggle and effort, passion and action. Tamas is the force of inconscience and inertia and translate in quality as obscurity and incapacity and inaction. Just as described, the guru of the little yoga group I go to describes it much the same way.
Now, these are ancient yogic concepts that
Yeah.
he's borrowing here. He hasn't changed them in any way. So yeah, this goes back maybe 3,000 years or so. So they've seen, yogis have seen this in people for centuries and centuries. Every created thing is a constantly maintained poise of these 3 natural forces, according to Aurobindo. In each case, one quality typically stands in the foreground, while the other 2 adopt less prominent roles. They are never entirely absent, however, despite all appearances to the contrary. In the case of the physical plane, it is tamas, the force of inertia, which is the predominant quality. Rajas and sattva remain relatively unseen at this point. The vital plane, on the other hand, is ruled by Rajas, the force of kinesis. The mental plane is primarily sattvic in nature, but it has the other two available. The three qualities not only apply to the cosmic planes of consciousness, they also characterize the members of each plane. A material being, such as a mineral, for instance, is easily identifiable as predominantly tamasic. Lots and lots of inertia. Because human beings are composite entities composed of the mental, vital, and physical planes, they cannot be so straightforwardly categorized. The three qualities throw us into a constant state of turmoil as they struggle for supremacy. Even though an individual's general outlook may be rajasic, he or she will occasionally have to deal with intrusions of tamas and sattva. They're always wrestling with you. All right, number 14 goes to David.
Okay,
David Erickson?
yeah, I'm right here.
Sorry, David.
Oh.
David Oak. I
Oh,
should
just,
have-
I'm sorry. I'll mute.
I'm sorry, I beg your pardon.
Oh, you wanted me, David Erickson, that's me, okay.
Yeah.
All have in great or in small extent or degree, even if sometimes in a hardly appreciable minimum, their sattvic states and clear tracks or inchoate tendencies of light, clarity, and happiness. Fine adaptation and sympathy with the environment, intelligence, poise, right mind, right will and feeling, right impulse, virtue, order. All have their rajasic moods and impulses, and turbid parts of desire and passion and struggle, perversion and falsehood and error, unbalanced joy and sorrow, aggressive push to work and eager creation and strong or bold or fiery or fierce reactions to the pressure of the environment and to life's assaults and offers. All have their tamasic states and constant obscure parts, their moments or points of unconsciousness, their long habit or their temporary vanities of weak resignation or dull acceptance, their constitutional feebleness or movement of fatigue, negligence, and indolence, and their lapses into ignorance and incapacity, depression, and fear and cowardly recoil or submission to the environment and to the pressure of men and events and forces. The synthesis of yoga.
Okay.
So, depending on the specific makeup of the individual, one may be either tamasic, rajasic, or sattvic. This illustrates one of the fundamental properties of consciousness as understood by Aurobindo. Throughout all phases of development, he maintains that it is the disposition of the consciousness that determines everything, makes one predominantly mental, vital, physical, or psychic, bound or free, separate in the Purusha, or involved in the Prakriti. It's all about your level of consciousness. In addition, the person's surface personality is shaped by the object of his attention. Okay, physical man. The individual who focuses their attention on the physical plane is regarded as a physical man or woman. Makes sense. It's not a tough concept. Okay, Suzanne. This is number 15, please.
Such a person is mainly occupied with his corporeal life and habitual needs, impulses, life habits, mind habits, body habits, looking very little or not at all beyond that, subordinating and restricting all his other tendencies and possibilities to that narrow formation, the life divine, Sri Aurobindo.
So the physical person subordinates their vital or mental principles to the needs and concerns of their physical nature. Margaret, could you read 16 for us?
Sure.
Same topic.
This materialized soul lives bound to the physical body and its narrow, superficial external consciousness. And it takes normally the experiences of its physical organs, its senses, its matter-bound life and mind, with at most some limited spiritual glimpses, as the whole truth of existence.
So this type of individual thinks of the surrounding world as purely physical in nature. Their sense mind leads them to conclude that matter is that from which all is born, by which all lives, and to which all return in their passing. Therefore, they regard the divine as an infinite, preferably an inconscient infinite, inhabiting or pervading the material universe, which alone it really knows, and manifesting by the power of its presence all these forms around him. So in the Baha'i world, this would be the materialistic tendency that we see all around us. By the same token, when pondering their highest nature, the physical individual sees themselves as a vaguely conceived soul or spirit, a soul manifested only by the physical life's experiences, bound up with physical phenomenon and forced on its due solution to return by an automatic necessity to the vast indeterminateness of the infinite. It's pretty bleak. If such a physical person were to practice yoga, their newly found interest in the spirit would likely convert their strong attachment to physicality into a complete renunciation of matter. Inevitably, he begins to regard life on earth as a painful or troublesome incident or passage in which he can never arrive at any full enjoyment of his inner ideal self, his spiritual essence. Consequently, their spiritual efforts are aimed at escaping the world of matter as quickly as possible. The static infinity of Brahman without qualities, Nirguna Brahman, which I talked about last time, becomes their highest goal, in which the still freedom of Purusha is unlimited by Prakriti, the soul standing back from nature. So there's no integration whatsoever of the two. It's one or the other. That's all there is. Any thoughts at this point? Maybe it's a good time to have a little chat.
Mark, of course, I do talk too much. Always.
Oh, go ahead.
I recognize, my apologies. Too many things bouncing around in my head, but
Certainly.
Welcome to the club.
Okay, I'm not alone, eh, Belinda?
Yeah,
Mark, I was thinking when that was a perfect description. Abdu'l-Baha does say something almost identical, as you probably know, to what Abdu'l-Baha says, that there are some people who live only on the physical surface of life, and that's all they see. So maybe they'll get an occasional transcendent moment, you know? But it also made me think of the way that he has very poetically explained this struggle between spirit that, as he would seems to be putting it, is imprisoned in matter and strives to liberate itself as it goes up the arc of ascent. It reminded me of something that Shoghi Effendi said, that we have to struggle, how did he put it? Struggle against the natural inertia, the tamas, that weighs down on all of us.
Yep.
So the guardian acknowledged that contest, you know, between the desire to, you know, like that interesting word in the passage that David read, veleity. I had to look it up because it wasn't a word that I was familiar with. And it means a desire, but it's not strong enough to get you off your rear end to go and do the thing that you're feeling. That's a velleity. It's kind of a weak desire.
What is it?
Thank you for looking that up.
Well, go ahead.
Is that number 14?
Yeah, you got it.
Go ahead, Jack.
No, that's just all I wanted to say. But I guess the other question is, does it have to be a struggle all the time? Okay, here's another thought. The people who are atheists, what we have to figure out, and so much in life, and when we talk about the spiritual and material universe, so much hinges on this question. What is prior in existence, spirit or matter? Now, the materialists like Dawkins and Dennett and all these people, the new atheists, as they call them, they're saying that it's all materialistic and it will all be explained by science in terms of chemistry, basically. And those on the spiritual side, like Keith Ward, the theologian, Keith Ward, who wrote this wonderful book In Defense of the Soul, they're saying, no, it's spirit that is primary, not matter. But in the world that we're living in now, we experience them together, right? Like as you're teaching us and speaking to us, you're speaking, it's your soul that's talking to us. But we see Mark Heedwell, the man who looks, this handsome man, there's a compliment for you. This handsome man who is teaching us, and we see this medium that we perceive of you in a certain concrete way, but it's really the soul that speaks. And when we discard the body, when the body dies because it's destined to die, Baha'u'llah says this, death is a God-ordained phenomenon. Nobody escapes it. We don't like the idea, but it's there and we have to deal with it, especially at this time of life. And then when we abandon the body, then our existence becomes purely spiritual. So that's when we discover, that it's spirit that's primary, not matter. The materialists like Dawkins and Dennett and all those guys, they've got it backwards. But in this life, it goes together. They interact with one another. And then Aurobindo clearly is saying that. But the way he's presenting it, there's kind of a war going on between spirit and matter, right? That's a very universal thought in theology and spirituality. We have the same concept in the letters of St. Paul, I must apologize to Harold for correcting him. That was my ego talking. I shouldn't correct anybody. Not even I should correct myself, yes.
I need to be corrected. No problem.
Mark, do you see that Jocelyn has her hand up?
Yes, and I see Bill too.
Oh, Bill too. Sorry, Bill. Yeah.
Okay, Joey first.
This is a question, I'm not sure if I can articulate it well, but in the previous traditions, we've looked at the Arc of Ascent where you may make 2 steps forward and then you come backwards again, and it's not a straight line, if you will. In what Aurobindo is talking about and in the yoga tradition, is that as you move forward or move upwards, do you fall back at all, or do you continue the ascent?
There's an interesting dynamic that goes on. He's the best way to talk about it is every ascent that you make, you achieve some sort of new awareness, some sort of expanded consciousness. The way he describes it is you bring that back down to the normal person that you are. and shine that extra light on who you are so that you have a deeper sense and try to improve who you are. And then you go back up and then you come back down with the extra light. And it's a constant back and forth all the time until you've purified everything that you are here and brought these higher levels, as we saw in that staircase. As you get into higher levels of mind, you can bring some of the power and light from there down into the physical world and transform it with their energies. And it just continues on and on and on. He was doing that for over 40 years.
I
So
think Joey's asking, Marcus, does Sri Aurobindo say that we go backwards ever, or is it constantly going forward?
well, as circumstances evolve, you're capable of going backwards at any time, depending on your health, for instance. You can be taken right back to square one if you have a stroke, for instance. So nothing is certain.
What you're saying to me is you move forward and you gain something, you bring it back into who you are now.
Correct. Yeah. With the intention of moving forward. Okay, Belinda's got her hand up here. Bill, can I allow Belinda? Sorry. She looks very eager.
Yeah. I wanted to add a couple of things. This little yoga group I've been going to for a few years. The guru is a very elderly gentleman from Mauritius, comes from a family where maybe not his father, but his grandfather was a Swami yoga practitioner and so forth. When I got into the group, I discovered that a number of members of the group have done a lot of the asanas. I haven't. And at his age, he wasn't prepared to start doing that with us because most of the people in the group already have that. But what I did notice was that he talked about the gunas, and then he talked about doshas. Doshas have to do with the physical being. And he spent a fair amount of time with us talking about measuring the three levels or the three forms of energy. And I can't remember the names of them, but one of them is about heat and energy, and one of them I think is about air, and the other one I can't remember exactly what it is, but and advising us to examine that in ourselves, each of us, and then figure out, and we had a questionnaire that gave us number answers, how to bring the numbers to into balance, because somebody's very high on one thing and very low on another, and how to bring those numbers back closer together. So the three numbers involved, yeah, there are always going to be two dominant, not one not, but bringing them all closer together. They'll never be all the same, and they shouldn't be, but to establish a kind of physical harmony. So what he obviously was concerned about is that our physical being needs to be in good shape, or as good a shape as it's possible. So he's sort of not discarding the material level of our lives, but trying to help us find ways to manage it better, obviously so as to release the spiritual part. So now another question that came up, Joey mentioned, can you fall back? And now this guru really believes in multiple lives and all that stuff, but so I mean, I don't challenge him on that. I just leave it. But he says, yes, it is possible. Somebody can start this life at a good level and then lose that and have to go back and do it over again. You know, it's not always a secure step of progression. So at any point you might start at the level of, you know, of a well-practiced yoga in your previous life. And you might start at that level with a good family and good circumstances and all the rest of it. And you might screw it up and go back to a previous level and have to do it over again. Another concept he introduced is the subconscious is full of all the experiences we've had in our previous lives. I personally prefer the more Jungian concept of a collective memory, but that's neither here nor there. It's just part of what he's talking about. And I bring that in because this is an example of a modern yoga practitioner teaching. And he is familiar with Aurobindo, made very positive comments. It's obviously read one or more of his books in the past, made very positive comments about that when I asked him. And so that, for what it's worth, there it is.
Mark, should we go on or can I add one more?
Well, I have
comment?
to come to Bill. I'm hoping he
Oh,
hasn't
sorry,
forgotten
yeah.
his question. It's been so long since I've, yeah.
I
Okay.
hope I'm not once again bringing things to a more mundane level, because I really enjoy, you know, the level that people are operating at here. But someone said when after the reading of number 6 in class 5 that they were saddened by this description of ordinary people living on the surface. And my thought on that is that like, this is most people. Ordinary people is a lot of people, and that sadness is justified. When I see people all happy and joyous, I'm thinking they must not know what's going on, because I'm, you know, vaguely aware that we have the mass of, I would say, the majority of humanity living at this surface level with no intent to go deeper, no desire to go deeper. And that's a force. That's a force that directs humanity in a direction that is going and has been going for some time. And this describes, in my mind, why it's so important for us to do what we call teaching, not necessarily teaching the faith, but teaching people the value of and the means by which to achieve that depth, to go below that surface, and to begin to be part of the force of humanity that Baha'is want to be a part of, and that is bringing it forward into its best possible evolution. Sorry.
That's good. It makes me think that the ordinary people that are being described in number 6 would have a very tough time with the restrictions in the COVID world. Whereas people who have developed any kind of depth didn't have as big a problem with the fact that they were isolated, because they had inner resources to turn to. Okay, Harold and then David.
I used to live in the San Francisco Bay Area for about 6 years. And, you know, a lot of people followed gurus, and it was sort of like the holy land of the human potential movement,
right?
And transpersonal psychology and Maslow, you know, just before he died, he was generating another branch. Anyway, a lot of what Aurobindo describes, it reminded me of the phrase, get it together. So getting it together means you're attending to all the inner voices or forces within you, and you're not letting them overwhelm you. You're organizing them through, I'm using his term, through Purusha. You have a powerful self in there that sees all that chaos and can organize it. So get it together means, as I'm interpreting it, your Purusha or true self sees the chatter and the voices and the different needs and aspirations of all those inner voices and can organize them into something productive. And if you don't do that, it can get very bad. You can be schizophrenic. You can be completely overwhelmed by the chaos of the inner dimensions. So I think he's describing, you know, there's a lot down there, and he names it in different ways, you know, using old terms and new terms, it seems to me. And, you know, it's quite interesting. get it together. He wants us to get it together in a way to evolve, and not only evolve ourselves, but evolve the race. You know.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, that's good. Okay, David.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Yeah. Well, just on one point there, that's one of the main objectives, of yoga, what you just said. And furthermore, I think Carl Gustav Jung understood what you said too, because that was in one sense his objective. What I wanted to say is that, I think we see what we call matter, which includes the whole universe, in the wrong way. And, I think as we spiritualize ourselves, we are also spiritualizing planet Earth and also the universe. Because my feeling is that there's a reason, for the creation. Baha'u'llah says that, the universe is one of the divine worlds of God. Why does he say that? So, if we say it's just, just matter that doesn't have any this or that or the other thing, I disagree with that, because the way I see it is that the universe has a role to play in human development, and vice versa. And this is what the sciences, and in my case, particularly in the physical sciences, this is what's been going on, whether or not the scientists understand that or not. So, to spiritualize ourselves and as well as the universe is extremely important. And then we will see ourselves as well as the universe in an entirely different way. So I feel that there is great importance to the existence of the universe. Baha'u'llah, by the way, and Abdu'l-Baha are very kind to the people who are at the level of matter, in terms of all this conflicting stuff and so on and so forth and whatnot. Baha'u'llah is very kind to those people, and so is Abdu'l-Baha. And so, we have all this in us, no matter what level we are at, or we think we are at. So, as it is said, the reality is within us. It's as deep as the ocean, and we're like an island, in which is which is that little consciousness. But surrounding it and below it, it's very, very deep, and we're unaware of it. But it's just the same. So I'll stop there. But I just wanted to make that point, about ourselves in relation to the universe and vice versa.
I think you're very much in alignment with where we're going with Aurobindo. I think he's going to talk about many of the things that you've just raised.
Okay.
Yeah. Nina, are you raising your hand there, or? No, okay. I wasn't sure if you were asking to be noticed. Okay. Now I've just got.
That's why we call him Rabbi Erickson,
Yeah.
Thank you. Here you go again, Jack.
Mark,
So,
one last
also
quick one quickie, if I could.
Okay.
Abdu'l-Baha is very clear, and this is a close paraphrase, that this world of mortality, he says, is a world of contradictions and opposites. And we have to learn. I once had an interesting conversation with David about dichotomies. And by the way, David, I thanked you in the acknowledgements of the book I'm trying to finish on the Seven Valleys for that. But we have to learn to not get stuck in these dichotomies. This is why the Universal House of Justice, for a while, they were always talking about false dichotomies. The phrase almost became fashionable in the Baha'i community for a while. We have to get around looking at these things as, which has a long intellectual tradition of flesh warring against spirit, and Aurobindo, he seems to follow to some extent in that tradition, but is there another way of looking at it that, you know, matter is infused with spirit? So it's matter, it's spirit indwelling and uplifting. I mean, Aurobindo's probably going to go this way, but it's spirit indwelling and uplifting matter. And that, perhaps that helps us to overcome this dichotomous way of thinking, which has led to asceticism. In religion, very harmful asceticism, anti-worldliness, all of that. And coming to David's point, well, of course, God created the universe. It's a physical reality. But the trouble is, and now we're getting closer to that spiritualization of the universe that David was talking about, with the new frontier is consciousness. Have you noticed how, and Mark, you're going to be getting right into this, I know, how everybody's talking now about consciousness. Why? Because it's the new frontier. And even scientists are beginning now to talk about consciousness because they don't know exactly what it is. So there are different ways of looking at this, and perhaps we can look for a way where we get out of these dichotomies of flesh warring against spirit and so on and so forth, although life is very much a struggle, and try to look at these things in a more interpenetrating or collaborative way. Does it have to always be a struggle? Although it does seem that life is very much like this much of the time, but does it have to be like that?
I would argue it's a matter of perspective. And if you're coming at it from the level of the material, it's going to be a problem that you're going to be seeing things in conflictual terms all the way through. As you rise through the higher levels of mind, though, that becomes less and less the case. So let me just finish off with two further concepts so that we're on track for next week. I want to talk about the physical mind now. The body, which is not merely unconscious matter, but is a structure of secretly conscious energy that has taken form in it, as a form of consciousness which is different from and independent of the mind on its own. The physical mind is a part of the human mind which is intermingled with and partakes of the characteristics of the physical consciousness. Some of the chief characteristics of the physical, namely inertia, obscurity, mechanical repetitiveness, automatism, constriction, and chaotic activity, are reflected in the physical mind in the form of mental torpor, doubt, mechanical reactions to things, habitual modes of thinking, and confusion. In fact, the part of the mind which is closest to the physical is referred to as the mechanical mind. It's like a machine that goes on turning whatever thoughts occur in it round and round. I see that I missed Kim in my listing, and I'm hoping that you can read, if I just screen share again. This should be number 17. Here we are.
The body also has a consciousness of its own, and though it is a submental instrument or servant consciousness, it can disobey or fail to obey as well. In many things, in matters of health and illness, for instance, in all automatic functionings, the body acts on its own and is not a servant of the mind. If it is fatigued, it can offer a passive resistance to the mind's will. It can cloud the mind with tamas, inertia, dullness, fumes of the subconscious, so that the mind cannot act. The arm lifts, no doubt, when it gets the suggestion, but at first the legs do not obey when they are asked to walk. They have to learn how to leave the crawling attitude and movement and take up the erect and ambulatory habit. When you first ask the hand to draw a straight line or to play music, it can't do it and won't do it. It has to be schooled, trained, taught, and afterwards it does automatically what is required of it. All this proves that there is a body consciousness which can do things at the mind's order, but has to be awakened, trained, made a good and conscious instrument.
That's I think, a wonderful description of the limitations of the physical mind, but its capabilities too. Once you train it properly, it can do things forever, without supervision even. So let's talk about environmental consciousness. Aurobindo also calls it the circumconscient. The physical body is enveloped in an environmental consciousness known as the circumconscient. This surrounding consciousness is part of the individual through which he or she is in inner contact with other beings and with universal forces. How about Eva? We didn't get to you either by that, as we went through.
By environmental consciousness, I mean something that each man carries around him, outside his body, even when he is not aware of it, by which he is in touch with others and with the universal forces. It is through this that the thoughts, feelings, etc. of others pass to enter into one. It is though this is that waves of the universal force, desire, sex, etc., come in and take possession of the mind, vital or body.
Now, this is a fairly new idea to people who are not involved in yoga, that much of what we think are our thoughts or feelings are coming to us from the surrounding environment. We don't see them penetrating our regular consciousness from outside. We just think they're ours. And yet, if you take a look at what happens in mass consciousness, for instance, where an entire country is swept by the same feelings, the same thoughts, with sometimes disastrous results, as you saw in Germany, for instance, in the wars. There's a lot to be said for this kind of a concept. We need to investigate it further, as far as I can tell. This environmental consciousness acts as a buffer zone between the cosmic planes outside the physical body and the individual center of consciousness inside. All messages from the surrounding cosmic planes must first enter the circumconscient, where they are screened and often delayed, occasionally even rejected before passing into the physical body. And we're back to our first reader, Nina. Number 19.
Sorry, Nina, you'll have to unmute yourself. Thanks.
Each man has his own personal consciousness entrenched in his body and gets into touch with his surroundings only through his body and senses and the mind using the senses. Yet all the time, the universal forces are pouring into him without his knowing it. He is aware only of thoughts, feelings, etc., that rise to the surface, and these he takes for his own. Really, they come from outside in his mind waves, vital waves, waves of feelings and sensation, etc., which take particular form in him and rise to the surface after they have got inside. But they do not get into his body at once. He carries about with him an environmental consciousness called by the theosophist the aura, into which they first enter. If you can become conscious of this environmental self of yours, then you can catch the thought, passion, suggestion, or force of illness and prevent it from entering into you. If things in you are thrown out, they often do not go altogether, but take refuge in this environmental atmosphere, and from there they try to get in again, or they go to a distance outside, but linger on the outskirts, or even perhaps far off, waiting till they get an opportunity to attempt entrance. Letters on Yoga. Interesting.
Very interesting. So
Very.
we saw him describe that situation where he was asked to see thoughts coming into his mind from outside and then to block them, which he was very successful at doing. So it's the same thing that we're talking about here, but with not just thoughts, but with all sorts of other things, including illnesses. We have choice that we don't necessarily realize we have. We have more power over our environment than we expect. So one of the clearest examples of this delaying action may be observed in cases of illness. Aurobindo asserts that it is possible with the proper yogic training to strengthen the circumconscient to the point where it can actually repel illnesses before they lodge themselves within the human body. And we're going to close with Harold reading this one.
Are you there, Harold?
Yes, and I both assume. Oh boy, now I think they want me to say something. It's on mute. What does that mean? I wasn't even paying attention.
Hello, Harold.
Is not a good
Hello,
time?
yeah, sorry. I was talking to my wife. What should I do? Number 20?
Yes, please.
Okay, take illness. If we live only in the outward physical consciousness, we do not usually know that we are going to be ill until the symptoms of the malady declare themselves in the body. But if we develop the inward physical consciousness, we become aware of a subtle environmental physical atmosphere, and we can feel the forces of illness coming towards us through it.
Uh-oh.
No, what happened there? Harold, you just went mute.
I guess his wife didn't want to hear him finish.
Now you're unmuted again, Harold.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yeah, we missed. Well, where did you end? Where did we end there, Mark?
Feel them even at a distance.
Okay, that's right. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can, but you
Okay. Feel them even at a distance. And if we have learned how to do it, we can stop them by the will or otherwise. We sense too around us a vital physical or nervous envelope which radiates from the body and protects it. And we can feel the adverse forces trying to break through it and can interfere, stop them, or reinforce the nervous envelope. Or we can feel the symptoms of illness, fever, or cold, for instance, in the subtle physical sheath before they are manifest in the gross body, and destroy them there, preventing them from manifesting in the body. Wow, has he got a searchlight to look around inside? Amazing.
Absolutely. Okay. I think that's where I wanted to end today. Throwing a lot of information at you. I don't know how it's sitting with you. Any comments, replies, questions? Kim, yes, please.
Just to remark that many of the things that he's saying, both about consciousness and the body consciousness, are very relevant. And there's a lot of work going on in these areas, like the somatic yoga movement, you know, and you know, the mindfulness and body consciousness that is where a lot of even psychological work, as well as consciousness, spiritual and consciousness work and yoga work, are all coalescing into these areas. So he was really amazing how he is a precursor to all of that and informing all of that, I should say, really. So this is very interesting. I find it very interesting. He was ahead of his time in a way, and yet very based in the traditional yoga and the religion, his religion. Interesting. I was just watching the same concept of evolution through preservation of tradition by a musician called Cokie Lafarge earlier today. But the idea of needing to preserve and revere traditions, he was talking about music, but in Aurobindo's case, it's yoga and all of the teachings of that, in order to really evolve as a species. So very interesting stuff.
So was this this fellow that you're talking about, was he evolving music beyond the traditions?
Well, I think he was saying that people, humans, evolve by preserving the traditions of the past, and evolving by this particular musician, for example. Some would say that he's, you know, lost in the past and just doing traditional music and hate him for that or whatever, put him down for that. And others would say that they're purists, pure traditionalists in terms of their music, would say that because he's writing his own songs and being creative and inventive, he's straying from traditional music. So but what he was saying, it's kind of a TED Talk thing, I think, was that, you know, this kind of polarization that happens even within roots music in America, where, you know, blues is black people and country music is white people and all this, you know, and it has to be from a certain part of the states in order to be real and true. All of it. It's just, it's inclusive, you know. These forms of traditional roots music are everybody's now, and but it's important to know the real thing and to practice it, is what he was saying, and then go on from there. So I think it's important to know the tradition, you know, the teachings of the yoga traditions and Aurobindo is a good one to teach us, because we are going on from there. You know, it's like what is new is old and what is old is new.
Well, as long as you don't allow it to constrict you. That's one of the problems with tradition, that it often just ends up smothering you. So creativity is not allowed, you know, which defeats the purpose, really. So there's a balance there. David, you got your hand up.
I'll try to be just a sec. I'll try to be short. But I mean, I can have a great discussion with Kim, you know, very, very much, particularly on this business of music. And I wanted to say in any case that the whole presentation night was just terribly terrible. But anyway, you know, I just feel that talking about quote unquote our mindlessness, you know, we are very arrogant with regard to for example, the exploitation of the earth, with regard to pollution and climate change and so on and so forth. But you know, Rumi in the Masnavi said that if we try to force nature or the universe to give its answers to us, it won't. it will reject us and we will do nothing.
Yep.
But if we ourselves sit back and do not put anything on nature, nature will then answer us, will give us an answer. So I think this says something that is very important with regard to us in relation to the universe.
Well, there's another third approach, which I think is even more productive, and that is to love nature, to come at it with a loving embrace.
Yeah.
And then it's a little more likely to return the favor, to
exactly. Yeah.
reveal its secrets to you.
Mother Nature wants to be loved.
Yeah. Well, folks, I don't want to lengthen this any longer than it is already. I see we're almost at exactly at 9:30. How do I do it? How do I do it week after week?
I had my hand up, Mark.
Oh, did you? I didn't see it. Sorry, Jack, go for it.
Well, I took it down. I took it down because I didn't want it to.
Is it a long question or a comment?
Oh, no, it's huge. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
If it's under 1 minute, you're on.
Okay, start, put on the stopwatch there.
Yeah.
I wanted to go back to this concept of healing in the aura, which, as you pointed out, Aurobindo seemed to have the capability of warding off these thoughts in that very transformational moment that he experienced with the other guru. Now, Abdu'l-Baha, and this has been published in one of the early accounts, I forget, was asked by a pilgrim, what about these bad thoughts I'm having? And his answer was very much like what Aurobindo was saying, that they are reflected from other sources and we pick them up unconsciously. And it seems to me that what's useful about what Aurobindo is saying is that you can shield yourself or throw them out. How you do that, I'm not exactly sure, but he's telling us that it can be done. Now, Swami Vivekananda, who's my favorite Swami of all time, whose mission was to introduce Vedanta to the West and spoke at the World Parliament of Religions where Baha'u'llah's name was, or Baha'u'llah was mentioned, he predicted his own death and he died very young. And when he told his student that he was only going to live to be 38 years old or something like that, the student got very upset and said, no, master, you use your yogic powers to live longer. And he remonstrated with him. And Swami Vivekananda said, no, you don't understand, he said. My spirit has outgrown my body and I must move on. So that was very, I don't know what to make of that. It's very dramatic. It's very, but he felt his time had come when he couldn't do anything more in his body. So he, and it made me think of Abdu'l-Baha. You know, my private theory is Abdu'l-Baha didn't die of the fever. He decided to go. That, I mean, I can't prove that. This is just something I feel in my heart. Yes, Abdu'l-Baha had a bit of a fever, you know, but he said to his daughter, you give me food when I am going? And then he was gone. So did Abdu'l-Baha choose the moment of his death like Swami Vivekananda? I don't know. These are deep mysteries that we think about, you know, it's something to think about.
Well, we've got all week to think about it. So, good night, everybody. It was wonderful to see you all. Enjoy the heat wave that's coming.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, Linda, and goodbye, everybody.
Thank you,
Good night, everybody.
Mark. Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Linda.
Very much.
Hello
Keep
to
the love.
everybody.
Keep the love. That's the
Good night,
most.
everybody. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good night, Marie. See ya.
Bye.
This was a very interesting session. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks.
See ya,
Thanks a
Peter.
lot, Mark.
No problem.
Night, Peter.
Terrific.
Good night.
Good night.
Always good.
Okay, I have to get a hold of the cursor.